Today we're going to do an unboxing video, an initial impressions video of a knife that I just got in. And what we're basically going to do here, briefly on this video, I may do another video more in depth, but we're going to be comparing it to this knife here, which is a Viper-Tec Ultratec. So Pennsylvania recently got their act together and passed a law that legalized automatic knives. So I've kind of turned my attention toward the automatic knife market. This being the first one that I purchased, and is the Viper-Tec Ultratec. I just really kind of like the out the front look, and so I have a separate review up for this one. But I got to thinking, you know, obviously most people can't afford, or a lot of people, I won't say most people, but a lot of people can't afford to spend the kind of money that you have to spend to get a Viper-Tec or a similar out the front, like a Benchmade Infidel or something like that. So the Ultratec was the absolute top budget of what I'm willing to spend on a knife, and it's kind of the bottom budget of what you can get a Viper-Tec out the front for. So these knives retail right around the $300 or a little over the $300 mark, which is a lot of money for a knife. So there's a lot of people that would be turned off to buying an out the front just because they can't afford that $300 price point, and understandably so. So I got to thinking, well, what other options are there out there for those who want to get an out the front knife but on a budget, and are they any good? From my research online, kind of the answer is no, really. If you really want quality, you're not going to get it for a whole lot less than what you're going to pay for a Viper-Tec Ultratec. It's about as cheap as you can go and get a decent out the front. Now, there are a lot of other out the front models out there that are cheaper, around the $100, $150, even $200 range. And so that's where this comes in. I thought, well, let me just try to buy a cheaper one and see what my experience with it is. So I basically was looking for kind of a middle ground. You can buy really, really cheap, you know, $25, $35 out the fronts, and I just have a hard time believing those are going to be worth a whole lot, although I've heard that the Lightning out the fronts aren't that bad. This brand that we're going to look at today is Viper-Tec, and their out the fronts typically retail for right around the $90 mark. Those are ones that come with a 440C blade. They do have some other options and other blade steels, and the price goes up from there, but typically you're looking right around the $90 mark at their full retail price that they sell those for. Now, you can oftentimes find coupon codes. Honestly, I wouldn't have paid $90 for a knife from them without trying one out first. I was able to find a discount code for 35% off, and after using the code, even with taxes and shipping, which they say their shipping is free, but I ended up paying about $5 for shipping, so that ended up not being the case for me. Even after that, though, taxes and shipping, I think I paid about $62 for this knife. So for $62, I was willing to give it a shot and see what we end up with. So I'm going to go ahead and open this thing. We're going to look at it. We're going to see, does it make sense to spend, you know, $90, or even if you get a good deal on it and get it for the $60, does it make sense to spend $60 on a cheaper out the front? Or are you better off just biting the bullet, saving up for something like the Viper-Tec? All right, so there's not a lot really out there about the Viper-Tecs that I could find online. In fact, for the most part, I couldn't find any reviews or really anything on them. I was a little nervous after I purchased it that I would even get this thing in, because you look up like the BBB website, Better Business Bureau, and there's some pretty negative reviews on Viper-Tec and the companies that sell them. People weren't getting them, things like that. So I'll let you know my experience first with this thing was, I ordered it, and I will say that I've never gotten so many update emails from any company I've ever purchased from. I was getting texts and emails constantly updating me on the status of this order, where it was at, when it started shipping, all that kind of thing. They were on top of that, so I give them props for that. Now, it did take me, from the time I placed the order to the time it was in my mailbox, it did take me 8 days. So I ordered it on a Thursday, and I ended up getting it then on a Friday, the following Friday. So it did take a little bit of time to get it in, but I did eventually get it really 8 days isn't that bad. So I can't really complain about that too much. So we want to go ahead and take a look here and see what we got. So it looks like it comes in a nylon pouch of some sort, sheath, if you will. Let me set that to the side and we'll see what's in this. So they have out the front troubleshooting, basically just showing you if your knife comes off track, how to replace that or get that back on track, which I already know from the Micro-Tec and having used that. So it looks like it's the same process. So you do have this nylon sheath. It looks like you have a Velcro, potentially either belt loop, or if you wanted to strap it to something else, because it is Velcro and you can open and close it, it gives you that option. It does have the quick release connect there. And then here's the knife itself. So I will say that right off the bat, just some specs before I get too far into this. This knife is so much heavier than this knife. This knife is so light you hardly feel that it's in your hand or in your pocket. This thing feels like a beast compared to that. That is because while the Micro-Tec uses aluminum, the handle on this thing is made out of what they refer to as zinc alloy. So it's a lot heavier than the aluminum. Now, admittedly, this isn't a great comparison comparing it to the Ultratec. Realistically, I believe this would be closer to the Micro-Tec Combat Troodon as far as the size of it. But I think weight-wise, you're still going to notice a difference. This thing comes in at 9.17 ounces according to their specifications. It has an overall length once it's deployed of 9.4 inches and a blade of 3.9 inches. So we're going to go ahead and deploy this thing, see how it does. Take a look at that blade. Again, it's supposed to be just under 4 inches at 3.9, and it is made out of 440C stainless steel, which is not the best steel in the world. It gets looked down a lot today because we have so many other super steels out there now. But back in the day, 440C was considered a very decent steel for a knife blade, and it still has decent qualities. I mean, it's not as bad as some people would make it out to be. We've just progressed a long way since then. So I will say, as far as deploying it, man, that thing was way easier to deploy than the Micro-Tec, which is kind of a safety issue to some degree. I think the reason the Micro-Tecs are so hard to deploy is they don't want them accidentally going off. I mean, this thing, you still got to put some pressure on it. It's definitely a positive pressure, but it's easier to do than the Micro-Tec. It snaps out pretty good. It snaps back into the handle. It feels like a whole lot harder than the blade shoots out. I wouldn't say that it deploys necessarily with as much authority as the Micro-Tec does, but it still deploys pretty well. I don't really have any issue with that deployment. It seems to be pretty smooth. You can see here that this is a blade that comes black on kind of the bevels, and then on the flats, it's still got the plain finish or kind of a satin finish. I don't know, that knife feels like it's sharp. I'm not so sure how much it would shave or whether it's razor, but that's why we have paper, just to check that kind of stuff out. So yeah, it does look like it came razor sharp. I mean, it's slicing through that paper with no problem, so I've got no complaints there. I knew it felt fairly sharp, but I couldn't tell if it was quite that sharp, but it does seem like it's fairly sharp. I will say the point itself isn't overly sharp. It doesn't look like. It looks like they kind of rounded that off a little when they were maybe putting that bevel on. In fact, you can see some of the paint there at the tip is worn off on this side, as if they might have dragged the belt on that a little bit. Blade play is way worse than the Micro-Tec. Really not a whole lot of front to back play, but side to side. I'm guessing the microphone is picking that up. You can hear that rattle. Now, unless you kind of like slap it, you don't get a whole lot if you just wiggle it back and forth, but you can make it rattle. So yeah, a whole lot more blade play, I would say. It's definitely, the tolerances aren't as tight as on the Micro-Tec. But again, you got to realize that's a $60, well, I paid $60 for that knife. That's a $300 knife. So if you're somebody who really just wants to get the feel for, do you even like the out the front style of knife? I mean, just at a basic glance, I don't really have a problem with this thing. Of course, I haven't used it yet. This is just an unboxing video, so whether or not that'll hold true, I don't really know. You can see here it's got the belt clip. It is I would say it's a deep carry based on the handle position, but of course then you have this glass breaker pommel on the end, which is going to stick up above your pocket, which is true on the Micro-Tecs too. In fact, that's who they're trying to kind of copy here. But otherwise, kind of a plain, flat, deep carry clip. No problems with the clip there. It's got the Viper-Tec name on it. As far as the design of the handle, it gives you decent grip. They've got all this texturing in here. Kind of it almost gives it a rubbery feel, but it's not rubbery. Like if you scratch it, you can feel it's just steel or metal or alloy, in this case, zinc alloy. But it does give it a grippy feel. It doesn't feel like it's going to come out of your hand or like you can't get a good purchase on it. You can see this is actually, I don't know if I've even mentioned this yet, but the model here is the Viper-Tec Phantom. So the Phantom, I think, is their knockoff of the Combat Troodon as far as the size. It's supposed to have the almost 4-inch blade, a little bit bigger size. And then I think they make, I believe it's called the Ghost, is their smaller one that would kind of compete with the Ultratech. So this is the Viper-Tec Phantom, double action out the front knife. A couple of other, I would say maybe gimmicky things they have is they say that it comes with a lifetime warranty. I could not find anywhere online where anybody has ever tried to replace one of these things using that warranty. I don't have high confidence that you would have a lot of luck working with their customer service from what little bit I could find online about just trying to even contact the company. They do a good job of keeping you informed on your order progress, but it does sound like anytime you try to contact them back, you're going to really struggle to get any kind of response from what I've seen. These knives are labeled as assembled in the US. What that really means is all these parts are Chinese parts. It's Chinese blade, Chinese handle, Chinese parts. Everything about it's Chinese, but then they ship it over to the US and they assemble it in the US. And really that doesn't bother me if it keeps the prices down. I prefer to buy made in the US. I do buy stuff made in the US, but I do both. If you can keep the price down and it still be quality, then that's one thing. But with China, you never know if you're getting quality or not until you get it in your hand and you actually put it through its paces to find out how it does. So again, this thing retails, if you pay full price for it, right at the $90 mark. If you get some good coupons, discount codes, whatever, you can actually get this for a lot less. So whether or not you would want to spend the money on this thing, honestly, I think I'm going to have to do a follow-up video. This is just initial impressions. So it comes in the box. You got this sheath here that you can put it in if you want to carry it in a sheath instead of in your pocket using the pocket clip. You've got that option. Of course, it's going to be a lot harder to get to, having to flip that open and get to it versus just pulling it out of your pocket. So I don't see myself using that, but it's there if you want it. Otherwise, they just copied a lot of design cues off of the Micro-Tec. You got the glass breaker, pocket clip. The handle style's the same. I think this one, if you don't like the Tonto style blade, they did have a double edge, partially serrated. So it had serrations on the bottom half of the blade and then plain edge on the top half, but it was a dagger style blade, double edged. Those are the only two options on this particular model on the Phantom that I saw on their website. I didn't particularly care for the way that the dagger blade looked, and I wanted to actually try and use this thing to see how well it works. So a dagger blade or a double edged blade is not as useful for cutting tasks as a single edged blade. So my hope is that when I actually get this out and I start using it, it'll give me a better idea of whether it's worth it. And I can tell you this, if this blade even does half decent and doesn't give me issues with deploying as I get to using it, for the $60, I'll feel like I got a pretty good deal. I'm not going to complain about that. Just the cool factor of having a knife that you can, open and shut out the front, go to work, do whatever you need to do, retract it. The nice thing about this, I think, over like the Micro-Tec, is they're not using proprietary screws. So if you do have an issue, you should be able to go ahead and take this thing apart, hopefully address the issue, put it back together, and be good to go. My guess is the first time I encounter an issue, I'm going to go ahead and do what typically I would do with the Micro-Tec, which is just spray some room oil up in there, compressed air to clean it out, and see if that gets it to working. One thing I did want to check here on the video is the functionality of the blade safety when you deploy it into something. So we're going to go ahead and check that out real quick. All right, so that's about what I would expect. That's what the Viper-Tec does. That's what most out the fronts do. When they hit something, they stop, right? So you're still going to get some puncture there because of the point, although this one's not very sharp, so it wouldn't be that bad. And then ideally, you should be able to just pull this thing back up on the track, which it did, and it deploys just fine. So I'll say if nothing else, this is a $60 fidget toy, because if that doesn't break, that spring doesn't break from me doing this, then I'll be pretty pleased even with that, just because it's something that I can carry with me. I can abuse it and not feel bad if I do bust it up, and I still have the fun factor of the out the front deployment. So we'll have to see how this thing works as far as longevity goes. Like I said, I wanted to do a review, initial impressions and all that, just because there's not much out there on YouTube or even on the internet that I could find on these knives. So I will try to follow up with this. If you don't want to wait and you just really want to get an out the front and you're looking for a budget one, initial impressions, I would say with a word of caution that I don't know the longevity of it. I don't know how well it'll hold up to abuse and use. But as far as just fit and function, you know, is it a $300, $500 Viper-Tec? No. You can see, you know, some milling where the seams here don't perfectly meet up, but they're not causing hot spots. It feels smooth in the hand. You know, you can just see overall the quality maybe isn't quite there based on what you would get with a Viper-Tec. I think your blade, all blades are a little off center on out the front. This one's a little more so than the Viper-Tec, I believe. You know, you got a bigger gap on this side and, you know, less on that side. I think it's more noticeable. Of course, it is only 440C steel, so you're not getting any kind of super steel in that. But like I said, if this thing even lasts at all and holds up to any abuse for $60, just with the cool factor of having the out the front knife, you know, I'm going to be pretty happy with it. I will say that I'm not a huge fan of how much play there is, but I mean, it's a knife I paid $60 for. If I got a Viper-Tec that had that much play, I'd really be upset paying $300, $400, $500 for it. But for $60, you know, it wiggles, but it doesn't feel like it's really going anywhere necessarily. I should still be able to use it for just everyday cutting tasks. I mean, even if I just use this thing for opening packages and boxes, it's definitely going to do that just fine. If I try to do something a little heavier with it, we'll have to see how that holds up. And I will show you here that on the blade, it does say 440 steel there. Of course, it doesn't specify. It's supposed to be 440C. It doesn't say that on the blade. It just says 440. So whether or not that's 440 C or not, I don't know. But like I said, I mean, either way, your 440 series of steel anymore is not your high-end steel. It's not even your mid-grade steel anymore. It's considered pretty low-end. But a 440C blade can make a serviceable knife. I had plenty of those as a kid growing up, and I beat the heck out of those, and they worked just fine. I didn't have any problems with them. So, guys, that's kind of my initial impressions review. I got to say, I'm glad that it came in. I was a little worried about that. It took a little over a week to come in, which isn't too bad. They kept me informed. The knife itself functions well just out of the box as far as deployment goes. I got no problems there. It fits in the hand nicely. It feels good in the hand. It's a little heavy. That was to be expected. I knew that going in. But overall, getting it at a discounted rate and getting it for $60, I'm pretty happy with it right now. So let me know what you think, if you'd be interested in a knife like this, and I will try to follow up after I've had some time actually using this thing to let you know what I think. My expectations are this coating is going to come off the first time I even try to cut anything with it. I don't expect that to stay pretty. It's probably going to look pretty janky by the time I do a follow-up on this knife. But we'll see. I also think the paint's probably going to wear off the button and the sides and the edges and all that. On cheap knives, you don't ever expect that to hold up on the belt clip. But if that's all it is just aesthetics where you kind of have some wear and tear as far as the way it looks, but the blade actually functions well, I'm going to be extremely happy with that. Okay, I just wanted to kind of splice in a little bit here right at the end of the video. I've been carrying this around the rest of the evening today, just playing with it. Probably put it in and out a couple hundred times at this point. So a couple things I didn't cover. I want to cover a couple size comparisons and just a few other thoughts that I had just from carrying it around today. Not really using it, but just carrying it around. So first of all, size comparison. So I mentioned this thing has close to a 4-inch blade. So it's more in the size of the Combat Troodon. So comparing it to my typical comparison knives, you can see here the Paramilitary 2, Benchmade Griptilian. It is longer than either of those knives, which makes sense. These are closer to 3.5. That one's closer to 4. So it's longer than those. Of course, the knife that I'm kind of comparing it to is the Ultratech, and it's, of course, longer than that. This is more like 3.4 inches, and this one's 3.9, so a full half-inch longer on that knife. So size-wise, it's a fairly decent-sized knife. So just a couple thoughts I had from carrying it around. One of the things is you'll sometimes hear without the front knives, they have a spring noise. This thing is really bad about that. So I'm assuming you can hear that. Just to kind of show you the difference. That's the Microtech versus the Viper-Tec. So I know that wasn't focused. I was trying to get it up close to the mic so hopefully you can hear that tinging sound or the spring noise. Now, one of the things that I've heard fixes that on, you're more likely to get it on cheaper knives, but apparently even some Microtecs have it, is to go ahead and remove the cover here and then grease the springs inside, and putting some grease on those springs will keep that from happening. So I probably will try that. I will say that also when I kind of cut from the video to just carry this around for a little bit so I have a little bit better impression of it, I did go ahead and attempt to stab it into some wood, 2x4, several times, just to make sure that at least the blade wasn't going to retract from impact. Now, I didn't do it super hard, but just from what I did do, of course, I didn't have any issues with it retracting. I still say that the biggest issue is just the blade play on this thing. It's just so much blade play. You can get it to definitely rattle this way, and even front to back. I said there wasn't that much. There's more than I thought there was. That's what you're hearing there is front to back, side to side. So there's a lot of blade play there. I mean, I think it's still usable, but you definitely can see the difference between a, you know, 60, 70, whatever, $100 knife versus the Microtech, which still has a little bit of blade play, but it's much less and much tighter. You definitely can't make it rattle just by shaking it. That thing's, I mean, if you really pull it with your hands, you can make it move, but you're not going to be able to just do that. So obviously, I mean, that's not surprising to anybody. Nobody expects to have the same quality in a Chinese knockoff of a Microtech that, you know, you paid 60 something dollars for compared to the real thing. But like I said, I mean, I'm still going to carry this around. I'm going to use it. I'm going to see how it holds up. And if it is a serviceable, usable knife, then, you know, for the $60, it was probably worth it. I do think I'm going to tear it apart and try to grease that spring just because that sounds atrocious. It loses a little bit of its cool factor when it sounds like my one daughter, I opened it a couple times in front of her and closed it, and she said it sounded like a toy. So yeah, it kind of loses its cool factor when it sounds like that. So we'll see what happens. Of course, like I said, it's a cheaper knife anyway. So, but we'll go ahead and see if we can put some grease on that and get that to kind of dampen that spring noise. And then I'll like I said, I'll do another follow-up video here to just kind of see how it's handled being used and what that looks like. Whether it's a knife that you can actually use as an EDC or anything, I don't know, but we'll find out. All right, guys, I just want to do a quick update on this Viper-Tec Phantom that I got. Um, Tack it on to the end of the initial review here. I just want to say I haven't used it a whole lot, but I have used it a little bit, so I have a couple things I want to mention on it. You can see here that I did reprofile the blade from a Tonto point into a drop point. I just feel like that is a more useful blade shape for me, so I went ahead and just reprofiled that thing into a drop point blade. I like that a lot better. I like the way it functions. I like the way it looks. You can see here marks on the blade, on the black of the blade. This is me cutting cardboard with it. It is scuffing the paint, so I don't expect this paint to hold up much. That was only just a little bit of cardboard and it scuffed it up. Didn't actually remove or wear off any of the paint, but it left scuffs that won't clean off. You can't clean that off, so it did, you know, kind of abrade the paint there. Also, in the course of deploying this thing, I've deployed it probably a couple thousand times at this point. It's never failed once, so it's very reliable in the deploying and the retracting. But I did have a screw come out and lost a screw, and that was through doing nothing specific, just carrying it around. I will say that I contacted Viper-Tec to ask for a replacement screw, and they had it in the mail the next day. No questions asked. So customer service A+ on Viper-Tec for that. I did end up having to put Loctite on everything. I put Loctite on all the screws, put Loctite on the pommel here, and hopefully that will keep everything tight. I also took it apart and I put some grease on the spring here, and I'll link a video on taking that apart if you want to see what the inside of this thing looks like and how to do that. I will go ahead and put that video up then for you to look at as well. But overall, just thoughts, having carried it a little while now, this steel and reprofiling it and using it and sharpening it, I can tell you that this steel is super, super soft. They advertise it as a 440C. I would say it's more like a 420J2. It is definitely not a typical 440C. It's not hardened anywhere near that much. This is super soft steel. So if you want to pick one of these up, know that this thing's good for opening packages, maybe cutting tape, cutting paper, you know, opening junk mail, stuff like that. Other than that, I would not use this blade for any semi-hard use. I don't trust it not to just instantly go dull and be useless. It's super reliable, like I said, when it comes to putting it in and out. Haven't had any issues with that. Done that a couple thousand times, not an issue. The paint is already starting to wear off just from carrying it in my pocket for a couple weeks. Thumb stud or the thumb button, you got paint wearing off there as well, which makes sense. But I mean, that's basically it, guys. If you can pick this thing up for $60 and you just really want a really cool letter opener, something to open packages with, I think this will work fine for you. If you're expecting it to be more than that, if you're expecting it to be a true tool that you can use for heavy use or even, you know, self-defense, absolutely would not trust my life to this thing. Would not recommend it for that at all. As I showed before, lots of blade play. You know, you got cheap quality steel in the blade. This knife is just not going to be something that you're going to want to spend that kind of money on and expect, you know, to have a great knife for the price. Yes, it's only, you know, $90, or if you get it on sale, it's only $60 or whatever. But if you're looking at the quality of the blade, you can get a much better knife for $60 and a whole lot better knife for $90 than this. You're paying for the feature, the novelty of the out the front feature. So, but if you really want to get an out for the front knife and you just think it's going to be a cool grown-up fidget tool, fidget toy, and you don't want to spend the money that you would spend on a Microtech, something like this that actually has decent quality, then I would say, hey, go for it. Go ahead and get yourself a Viper-Tec. Just know the shortcomings. Know that you're going to have that soft steel. Know that you're going to need to take everything apart and put Loctite on it because they don't do that from the factory. And if you don't, you're going to have screws work loose, stuff fall apart. But reliable action, it definitely does have. So I will give it that.